My wonderful husband who played the American consulate as well. Please come up. Helga, please come on up, and let's see if we have some questions. Helga, who wrote the screenplay.
So we also have Martin Lucas from Film and Media Studies at Hunter College.
Cool. One more. Okay, cool. Here we go. Yeah, that's good. Okay, fine.
I didn't quite finish. So maybe we'll take a question or a comment from Martin first, if you may, and then we'll open it to Q&As. We will probably have about 20-25 minutes or so.
Okay. I guess the first question would be, you both have a credit for the screenplay. You've worked together in some way, and it seems as though it was a very elegant way of working, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that process itself, because you kind of play really on the edge of kind of dark comedy, but not quite getting over that edge, and I think it's a very special type of screenwriting.
Thank you, Martin. This is like a very difficult question, you know. I think collaborations are generally difficult, and I don't know, you know, we experimented with it, and there's a lot of Helga here and a lot of me, you know, in other ways. I think that's an interesting combination, and it's interesting. I thought about the tone a lot, and you know, in a lot of the ways it was an experiment in general, because I often refer to my husband, who's like, oh, I read the screenplay and I imagined it in black and white. Like he's just something else, and somehow I always saw it in a certain way, and you know, put in this more like house music, subculture elements there. So it was interesting because Helga had her own 90s and also lived through this time, but in a different way. And a lot of it, I feel like, you know, of course, all the graceful and elegant elements, they're all from Helga's, you know, Helga's being, you know, it was infused there. And that, you know, and I kept, like, the beautiful part about that collaboration was that as a director, as I came back to the screenplay, I kept finding them. She like buried all these treasures for me to hunt for. That for me, you know, as we're working in the screenplay, were not apparent, and so I was like, oh my God, you know, this is like a, you know, a total genius, with the work of total genius. It's first we've heard this story from a friend of mine in 2008. I have to say, as we actually traveled on a festival trip for one of Helga's films, we were, but I'm not sure. I think that's how we met Olga, who is based on a real story. I immediately was like, oh my God, this is a film. I don't know how to make it. And when I was at Columbia MFA, which is like very much a place I absolutely love and adore, in the screenwriting one, I started writing the script, and I have to say my draft was just horrible. So I was like, Helga, please look at this. This might never be anything worthwhile, but. I'm grateful Helga took it on and really, like, it really inspired kind of the making of this film. Helga, пожалуйста, скажи.
It was such a detailed story. I have very little to
recollection, little to add.
Yes, I guess I would just add that it is true. You know, we have different experience in different places in 1990s. And Darya was younger at the time, and I spent, you know, early 1990s in Moscow. Something is wrong with this.
Немножко еще ты будешь поверни вот так. You just sing into it.
Вот так лучше. Yes. So it was quite a bit different, and at the same time, I got to know quite well the world of secondhand stores and, you know, removed labels, because this is where we had these big shipments from Germany, and this is how I dressed my first, you know, my sons that were born in 1991. And this was the time when you could see porcelain cups and crystal chandeliers hanging from the trees. So it was a very intense and interesting time, and I was trying to combine my experience with something that Darya wanted to express in this film, which is closer subject to her because she was a DJ in New York. She was very much into house music, and I wanted to to incorporate these different experiences into the story.
Which suggests that, in fact, this is in a way a historical document in a certain kind of specific way. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you could speak to that, because it is, we're looking at something that was of a moment. We hear these lines about there being no rules, for instance, and ideas about freedom that seem to kind of meet and ignite just at that time. I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I think these ideas of freedom are still very much relevant, and that's why it played so well in Belarus. It's interesting. I wish I put a specific date on the film, because for me, as I started working through the material, it was easier to work through, like, okay, there's a time and place. And for me, it was like April 26, 1996. And it was the first time that, I experienced a violent political protest being kind of ripped apart, like the government ripped through the people. And so that's how this kind of, we had more of that story with Helga in the beginning and the end, and that's, at the end, you now only see she sees a couple of people going to a bigger protest, and but the audio is actually from a documentary footage. The audio is from that date and specific time. It was just interesting. I guess as I was thinking about my experience, I realized that I was very much connected to what we were, why we were questioning, should we stay or should we go, and this eternal question of the relationship with your homeland was also quite political. It's hard to be outside of politics, even though it's a story. She's not battling with the government forces per se. It's more like small town thinking, and the dramatic question kind of is along different lines. So it emerged, of course the time was, I felt like, it was much more optimistic. Like these things right now, it's hard to imagine these things happening in Minsk right now. And the country was at a crossroads, and there was a lot of optimism. It was like we felt like things could be possible that are maybe not possible right now. So I don't know, like the historical document in that sense for me was like very much represented that year 1996. And it was quite sad that it was, I had to just say 90s, and I had to cut that last scene for distribution in Belarus, because they just found that like it might cross the line. We had the same president since 1994. And we're constantly figuring out like, where is that censorship line? But because it was about the 90s, it kind of saved the film from, it helped the film. You could make this film because you could argue, this is the 90s before he came to power. So as long as you don't say 96, you're good. But for me, I was like, it's 96, 94, things were different, we would probably tell the story differently. I feel like it could be more about, there's nothing to eat, but there's still it's still very hopeful. It's a little bit better than I think like 93, or at least what how I interpreted the story. So that's what, I had to pretend it was something else. And then, of course, there was all this criticism. It was like, it's not 92. I was like, well, in the mid-90s, it was already this way. And especially, of course, I really wanted her to be a part of the subculture, and it definitely developed closer to the mid-90s.
But somehow, for us today, watching the film, there's still a kind of a space of hope in it, in an important way. I wondered if you could talk about how that comes out.
Well, I think it comes up with the last scene, and the small and Kostya who leaves with her, right? And we definitely thought about it as a hopeful gesture. Helga.
Yeah, I was trying to balance this with stolen money from. I always try to.
But she says she doesn't want the money, right? So
Right.
Yes.
So it has to be the right, amount of of different things. But I don't. It was actually a question at some point. You weren't sure you wanted to include this political ending at all.
Right. And I was missing it really. But why is it time and place? For me, it was just, I personally lived through it, so like it just became so. It's easier to as a jumping off point when you can imagine the time and place and the feeling like I know what I felt that day, that hopeful but loss of hope and the battling for, but it's still possible. But is it still possible? Is the freedom still possible? Is the freedom how we think about it? Is it even relevant? Yeah.
Thank you. If I may just ask, because I forgot to mention that this was also the film nominated for the best foreign film.
He wasn't nominated.
I'm sorry. It was.
He was a candidate.
A
Belarus
candidate, yeah.
sent it in as a candidate.
It's
yes,
a
for foreign
terminological
language, as
issue.
well as many other countries did. There were 5 films nominated. We were not on that list, unfortunately, but we were lucky to compete.
I used the wrong term. That's what I meant. It was also playing in Paris just today. With the time difference, a few hours ago, right? It's been also playing all over Europe.
We did something like 50 festivals or more, and we've gotten a lot of awards.
So,
yeah.
I just want to ask if you've been tracing or noticing any kind of reception paradigm across the different countries and also across the time period that it's been playing. It's a very new film, but nevertheless, things are so rapidly changing nowadays that perhaps you have something to say about it.
Well, I felt like there's a lot of gender in the film. It's quite gendered, the narrative. But in Eastern Europe, that discussion wasn't picked up necessarily at all. Like a lot of reviewers they were it's such a traumatic time for that part of the world, the 90s, that it was more of a vehicle to reflect and try to digest that time in a different way, possibly, because I don't think this is like Brat or Bratva, and it's a slightly different beast. So they were focusing on that. But as I traveled to Europe, there was more, they were relating to it differently. For them, the 90s wasn't like they didn't necessarily get the historical context, but it didn't matter. The idea that someone wants to leave their country and has an American dream was like a lot more universal as a way of connecting to the story, to his character. So I would say, so I was amazed as how, right now, this past weekend, we were in the youth competition in Austria, and we also got a youth jury in Ireland. So young people in Europe just thought it was also their own story.
Thank you. Questions? Students?
It's so hot
No
here.
student questions?
It's like a banya.
Большое спасибо. Thank you very much for the movie and for restoration of that, our habitat. I was not there in Ukraine, in Eastern Ukraine at that time. And for me, personally, it was the best part of my life, but for a lot of people around me, it was the worst part of their life. It's my personal story, doesn't matter. But thank you very much for recreation of that apartments, people, rock on the wall, psychology, when so easy from compassion to rape to after that trying to dismiss that person, to опустить, по-русски сказать. И публичная эта ментальность женщин, мужчин, это все, it's all coming back. Thank you very much. My question is, was it that movie seen in Belarus?
Yes, it was widely seen. It's right now very much available online as well in that whole region. We were in I don't know, 20 out of 22 movie theaters there for all of September in 2018, last year. So it got an amazing distribution, and we didn't expect it. I think the distributor then we ended up working with, they didn't have a precedent in near, like, just quite recently we didn't have a Belarus film that could be that widely released, and so nobody knew what they were doing. So we were trying things out, and somehow they were all working. I feel like I was very lucky to reach out to the audience. We surpassed our expectations in terms of like theater box office. Of course, there's a lot of love and a lot of hate. I'm not gonna lie. I think they were like, I didn't read that, but my parents did, and sometimes they would be like, oh, and I was like, I don't know, I'm not involved. But there was for some people at this time, you just mentioned the 90s, and I saw some friends of friends who saw it at the premiere screening, and they were walking out and they were crying. And it was like, how could you do it? Or it's like way too much. It's way too much. Even though, I find this film is, very gentle. It's a very gentle, it's not Gruz 200, там 200, да? It's not the, it's not the, there are a lot of, there's a lot of hope there. Okay. I don't find it like a, I don't know if I could place it in the Chernucha as some would claim. So there's a lot of debate, and actually, Tanya Zamirovskaya, who is sitting in the front row, wrote probably one of my most favorite reviews that I know Helga also really loves. So it's also the context. Like it needed discussion, and that happened, and it was really exciting. It was exciting for people to go, and they went and they saw a film about them, about the place they lived. Minsk is often shot for Moscow, for many other cities, but not for Minsk. So it was like, oh my God, there's something of ours that we can talk about. Of course, all my friends who went to the parties in the 90s, they came out and they were quite disappointed because it doesn't fully reflect that scene either. So everybody had their own little excitement. And everybody was trying to guess who the main characters were based on. So that's another game I played with my friends.
Hi. I think I have to hold it like this. Also, thank you, Helga, Darya, thank you. I left Minsk in 1990, so I missed all of that, but brought family members over, and my 17-year-old cousin came in 96, so I think she was living through that. I wanted to ask, Darya, you said that Helga's screenplay had surprises for you, or had treasures for you. And I was really curious because I saw so many amazing details in the film. I was curious, some examples of that. Can you think of any?
It's so hard to say. I mean, what you see on screen is also, just the hard work of nothing that we would put on screen could look good unless it was from that time. A lot of these objects are actually really vintage objects, and I don't know why, but something with the art department in Belarus, everything that they would make would just be like a sore. I would come in and be like, this cannot be in the frame. It just didn't work. So it was an extra hardship of asking friends, do you have anything from the time? Do you have a skirt? Do you have this? It was really, really quite an ordeal. Because I always thought that Minsk was, the time flows differently, and always felt like it was stuck in time in some ways, but it's not true, And for weeks after the shoot, I would just walk around and be like, new windows, new windows, new windows. Like I could see, that modern life, of course, took over. It's not, we have some idea that it's still stuck in the 90s, but it's quite modern. But it's I think people who see the film and recognize the maturity and love the dialogue, I think these are the most, being having those moments of subtext where it works not even on 2 levels, but on 3 levels. Like when he tells her, you could see, good actors playing it so well, because it had, does he know, is he trying to just play to the bride when he says, here's your money, or am I going to pay for your services, right? It's that line that could play on so many different levels, and you as an audience could choose your journey that you're going on. Is he paying for, because, they had sex, or is he just doing it to please the bride, to please his wife? Or are all these things working for you, which they are, right? So it's just something that, after the 15th time you see that take, you're like, wow, it keeps on giving because it's so potent.
I found the use of dialects very interesting, and like the Belarusian Zhuk that is made very, very, it just was truthful in the way that it was used. But I also know that Helga probably doesn't speak Belarusian, and how much of that was in the script, and how much was it something that the actors wrote in, and how much was it natural versus actual?
None of it is natural. All of them are actors and from Minsk. So it was just a request I made, and we worked on it. And it's, they all know friends who live in that area, or they would bring in some phrase, a catch-all phrase, or we would start to explore it. We had some rehearsal periods. That was nice. It's primarily because they're, most of my friends speak Russian, and I spoke Russian growing up. But as you move away from the capital, of course, there is мы называем это тросянкой. There are all these dialects. Of course, I wish I had more preparation, so the trosянka would be more precise. But to me, it was like it sounded good. So we added that in and added some of the dialect.
Вот, например, for example, there was the word потрясающе, but I love потрясающе so much more, which wasn't something I wrote, but so this is where, the actors and the work with actors, this is where it took the words that were there, but they weren't written this way, but they became so much more interesting.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the casting, because this was an amazing actress, just to know how this all come about.
By chance.
Just chance.
Well, I had a relationship. I started the casting process pretty early, even before I had the funding for the film. I didn't know if it's going to come together. But it's just one of the key things that I thought that would, I love working with actors. It's just so exciting. They always bring something interesting. I had a casting director in Moscow that would keep sending me ideas. I think maybe for a year before we really went into pre-production. And I also had another casting director in Minsk also attached to the project, and so all the we went through everybody there. I did several casting sessions in New York, and I think I saw some women in Paris, even, obviously all from Eastern Europe. So it was just like a meticulous and daunting process, really. Alina came on really late. I have to say it was a heartbreaking situation where I had someone else that I like to say I got married to her, because you choose someone and you're like, okay, this is my person, and we started working together. And but my casting director she just kept on me. She's like, I don't believe her. I don't think, it's like in the David Lynch movie, this is the girl, the it girl, and it really was like this the mystery. Is it the girl? And then she would call me up at night. She's like, this is not the girl. And I was like, come on. And she's like, it's never too late to jump into the last bandwagon. She kept saying that. And so she sent me Alina. And when she sent me Alina, I think, there was a self-tape where Alina was just introducing herself and saying, I'm such and such. And she said something, I'm not an actress, I'm an artist. And I was like, okay, I love this girl. who's like, we gotta get her in. But of course she was in Switzerland or wherever. Alina is from Siberia. She's from Novosibirsk. She finished the MHT. She's really, has lovely training, and it was her first lead role. She was in another film before. She had a smaller role. I never saw the film. That film wasn't still in post-production, so it's nothing for me to see. I only saw what Alina was, and we just fell in love. It was like love from first sight. It was that type of situation where you're like, oh wow, I could work with her. Of course, it was challenging because she came in. We had only 2 weeks together. And she also had a very busy schedule in Moscow. So a lot of what ended up on screen is like what we were working on. We were working throughout the shooting process. Like this is what the character we were creating. And she was a workhorse, so like that helped. Because she's like a lot of the times she's in every scene, and the days were really long. And throughout the shooting period, I think twice that she had to go to some Arkhangelsk, or God knows where, to do a theater performance also. And she would like go away, take lots of flights, like go perform and come back. It's really intense when you go into a low budget film and how much you have to give.
Maybe one more question from the student audience, please.
Hi. It's a simple question. Maybe not. I don't know. Seeing the movie now, do you think that there's anything that you don't like or like especially? Like the scene with him paying money is obviously such a huge scene, like you said, it keeps giving. Do you think there are other scenes that you wanted to make more like that, or that ended up like that way inadvertently?
Well, if I would go down that route, there would be no film. I think every filmmaker has many things that they would like to explore or try again, but unfortunately we have 22 shooting days and that's it. and then you have to edit it. So I don't know. I mean, do I have any regrets? No, I'm quite happy with what we have, what we've got. There's no. I'm sure Helga has more of these.
But I'm not the maker, so I don't have any sense. No, what I told Darya first when I saw the film, and which actually was my favorite part about it. It was the cast and how incredibly close, because she's using the documentary footage, and I said that it's such a powerful thing that the people you chose, they merge with this crowd that was videotaped on the streets in 1990.
So the documentary is not there anymore.
Yes.
Helga saw some documentary from 1996
that used to be part of the
were
film
trying to
and
work into the narrative.
right, but but this it's called in Russian "попадание," like the match, and the ability to find these people, the faces, the clothes, the mimics, so true to time is very impressive, and this is my favorite part of what's happening.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but let's thank our students. Our next event is May 14th. Stay tuned.
What is it?